When I reviewed the Meepo Envy back in the summer of 2023, I said it was my favourite electric skateboard. Now, almost 9 months later, that's still completely true. I ride it all the time, and it's just as fun and exciting as ever. In the time since, I've made it my own by removing the palm tree grip tape and applying my signature mix of vicious grip and ridiculous kitten and rainbow grip tape. I also swapped out the wheels and have been using Meepo's Cyclone 105s instead of the standard 90mm green wheels. The Cyclones are essentially a clone of the old boosted 105s, and they're very similar to the Mad wheels too. The larger diameter and softer durometer make them great for dealing with crusty British streets, and they mean you can handle slightly bigger cracks, bumps and potholes than you could with the harder 90mm wheels. Of course, there's still limitations to these wheels, and if you're trying to tackle a bit of off-roading or maybe some gravel, you're not likely to have a good time. That's fine, it's not what they were designed for, but what if you really want to use your Envy on that kind of terrain? Well, thanks to the new off-road conversion kit from Meepo, it's entirely possible. The kit includes the entire drivetrain and truck assembly, and it comes mostly assembled right out of the box. You also get some additional bolts included, which is nice and a little unnecessary, as you can just use your existing bolts, and the only parts you'll need to install are the cable guides. Getting set up is super easy. If you've ever swapped trucks on a skateboard, that's basically all you need to do here. The only addition is connecting 2 motor wires and tucking them under the cable guides. The whole thing can be done in about 10 or 15 minutes just using the T-tool that came with your Envy. Keep in mind, the off-road kit uses dual kingpin trucks, which are installed in the traditional orientation, the opposite to the reverse kingpin trucks that came with the Envy. Once everything's bolted together, you just need to reset the motor type. Meepo has an instructional video on how to do this, but basically you turn the board and the remote on, then you turn the board off and on again, followed by 5 quick presses of the ESC power switch. The motors will then spin up for about a minute to calibrate themselves, so obviously do this with the wheels in the air, then you're good to go. The all-terrain kit adds a lot of height to the Envy, so right off the bat, pushing feels very odd. For some reason, it makes the deck feel more flexy too. Takes some getting used to, but the result is an extremely comfortable ride. Suddenly, rough pavements feel smooth, and you hardly have to worry about things like cracks in the pavement, drain covers and blind bumps. These massive wheels just glide over everything with ease. If you use your board to commute, it feels like the best way to go about it. It's very practical. I haven't ridden dual kingpin trucks in a very long time, and it's my first time using them on an electric skateboard. It's an unusual feeling, and honestly, I prefer the way that reverse kingpin trucks carve, but that might just be because I've used them for like 20 years. I can see why Meepo has used them here though. They add height and they also extend the wheelbase, so there's basically no chance of the massive tyres hitting the deck. At the same time, they make the board turn sharper, which counteracts the extended wheelbase and makes the board feel more nimble. The trucks have 100A bushings all around, which is generally about as hard as they come, and honestly I feel like I could use harder bushings. I'm a heavier rider, weighing somewhere around 230 pounds, and the dual kingpin setup feels a little unstable for me. I'm sure it'd be better with a lighter rider, and I can control it just fine, but I'm not going to be gunning it at top speed on these trucks. They just don't feel predictable enough. The off-road kit comes with airless tyres, and I'm happy to see it. It's true that you can get a smoother ride with pneumatics, but after catching multiple flats on the Splash scooter, I'm in no rush to change another inner tube. The Swiss cheese style design makes these tyres more than soft enough for street riding and hard packed dirt, and that's all you really need on a board like this. Honestly, this kit arrived at the wrong time of year for me. It's been raining a lot, so woodland trails are off limits as the ground has turned into muddy porridge. Even the grass is too soft. I did, however, manage to find some gravel tracks to try it out on, as well as some horrible crusty British streets. If you're determined enough, you can take a standard board on these surfaces too, but you wouldn't want to. It's incredibly uncomfortable and hard to control, and you'd need balls of steel to go over 10 miles per hour. With the all-terrain kit installed though, it's a different story. It basically turns unrideable roads into rough roads, and rough roads into smooth ones. It's great. For the most part, I just rode the off-road Envy everywhere I'd ride the regular Envy, but the lack of anxiety about cracks and pebbles made it feel like an entirely new experience. Another thing I love about this kit is that I can grab the rear truck and wheel the board behind me like a suitcase. I'm too tall to be able to do this with the standard configuration, but the extended wheelbase makes it work well here, and given how heavy this setup is, it makes it much easier to live with. One of my main concerns with the off-road kit is that it would reduce the torque and therefore impact the hill climbing abilities of the Meepo Envy. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. It's definitely a little slower off the line, but it gets up hills just as well as usual. I climbed the steepest hill in my area, switched back to the 105s and did it again to compare. Both times I was below 50% battery and I didn't recharge after swapping the drivetrain. The smaller wheels were about a mile per hour slower, but that's probably more to do with the state of charge of the battery than anything else. Basically, the big wheels don't make a huge difference, and that's great news, because I thought it would be much worse in this area. As mentioned earlier, I don't feel overly confident on the dual kingpin trucks, so I'm not going to be doing a top speed run on this setup. But after riding it for about a month, what I've noticed is that it's a little slower on acceleration, but it seems to be just as fast once it gets going. I've had it up to about 23 miles per hour and it feels like it can go much faster, so the top speed is likely to be quite similar. I've also noticed that the battery seems to be draining a bit quicker, and that's something I wanted to test out. So I rode a 4.5 mile loop of my local area. I first did it with the 105s, starting at 100% charge, and checked the remaining capacity when I finished the ride. Then I swapped back to the off-road kit, charged it up and did it again. It's not the most scientific test, as the remote shows bars instead of a percentage, but I still managed to get some useful information. After completing the loop, the 105s use 1 bar of battery, whereas the off-road wheels drain 2 bars. So yeah, it doesn't go as far. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and cons. Here are the things that I liked. The first is a smooth ride. If you live anywhere like me with rough streets, then this really takes the anxiety out of riding. You're not going to worry about cracks and pebbles because you can just roll right over them. Next is the versatility. I'm able to go places that I normally wouldn't take an electric skateboard. Like you saw gravel tracks in this videos, and I'm really excited to explore the woods when the weather gets a bit better. The easy setup. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes to put this together, so you can just switch between your street wheels and your big off-road wheels as you see fit. The ability to tow it. Like I showed in the video, I can drag it behind me like a suitcase, and I can't do that with shorter boards. The fact that it's cheaper than buying a whole nother board, I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's cheaper. And as for what I don't like, the main thing is the stability of the dual kingpin trucks. It just doesn't feel that predictable to me. I can manage it, but I prefer reverse kingpin or even just traditional kingpin because I know how they're going to turn. Then there's the fact that it just feels a little bit less like longboarding. I got into electric skateboarding because I love longboarding, and you lose some of that feeling here. It becomes a bit more like a mountain board, obviously, with big mountain board wheels. So you may love it, you may hate it, but yeah. The battery drain, as I showed, it just doesn't quite last as long when you've got these big wheels on. With a big battery like this, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, you're not going to be going on any super long range rides using this setup because your battery won't last as long. So should you buy one? Well, if you already own the Meepo Envy and you like the idea of hitting some crustier streets or maybe some off-road terrain, then this is a pretty good way to go about it. It currently sells for $340, and that's way cheaper than buying a whole nother setup. And the fact that you can just swap over to it in a few minutes makes it a decent deal. And even if you don't own an Envy, it's still a pretty good deal. The Envy currently goes for about $650, so the kit and the Envy combined are still under $1,000, which is cheaper than a lot of other boards, and it rides well in both scenarios. Personally, if I'm just out riding for fun, I prefer the feeling of street wheels. It's what I'm used to, and the carve is just more predictable and skatey feeling. So the street wheels will probably live on my board most of the time. But if I'm riding for longer or hitting some crustier streets, then these bigger wheels are much more comfortable, so I'll just be swapping over as I see fit. So that's about it for this one. I hope you found it useful. If you like this kind of thing, maybe don't subscribe, because there's probably going to be a bit less electric skateboard stuff going forward. I'm focusing more on pocketable cameras like smartphones and action cameras. So if you like that kind of thing, then subscribe. And yeah, otherwise, Daniel Kwan's pretty good. Okay, subscribe to him. Until next time, toodles.